-42 degrees Celsius. The air snapped with a frost so sudden and violent that synthetic oil turned to glue inside the engines of German panzer tanks stalled just 30 kilometers from the Kremlin walls on a Tuesday in December 1941. It was a cold that burned exposed skin within seconds, turning the very atmosphere into a weapon of war that had defended this geographic coordinate for centuries. Snowdrifts buried the cobblestones. While the Wehrmacht froze in their summer uniforms, the city behind the barricades was burning coal, steel, and human will to survive an annihilation that seemed inevitable. This temperature is not just a meteorological footnote. It is the fundamental architect of a metropolis built to withstand extreme pressure, both from the sky and from within its own halls of power. Moscow is a survivor. The origins of this sprawling giant were far more humble than the golden domes of today suggest, beginning as a minor wooden trading post on a muddy riverbank. Prince Yuri Dolgoruki is credited with hosting the first Moscow dinner here in 1147, inviting a localized ally to look upon a small fortress surrounded by dense pine forests. Geography was destiny. The settlement sat at a crucial watershed between the Oka and Volga rivers, allowing it to control the trade of furs, wax, and honey moving north and south across the Russian plain. Yet wood burns. For the first 300 years of its existence, the city was defined by ash, raised repeatedly by the Mongols and accidental infernos that consumed entire districts in hours. It was Ivan III, known as the Great, who decided that the capital of a rising power required a skin that could not be torched by invading cavalries. He did not look to local builders for this monumental upgrade. In a move that surprised his court, Ivan summoned master engineers from Renaissance Italy, including Aristotle Fioravanti, to reimagine the Kremlin not as a Russian stockade but as a Milanese fortress. Red brick towers rose. They engineered the jagged swallowtail battlements that still crown the Kremlin walls today, creating a visual link between the heart of Russia and the castles of Verona. This fortified triangle, enclosing 27 hectares of cathedrals and armories, became the nucleus around which the entire urban organism would spiral outward. The city grew in rings. Like the growth rings of an ancient oak, new defensive walls were constructed further and further out. The Kidai-Gorod Wall, the White City Wall, and the Earthen City Wall, each layer expanding the protected zone as the population swelled. These ancient ramparts are gone now, ghosted into the modern map as the Boulevard Ring and the Garden Ring, broad asphalt arteries where traffic jams have replaced archers. By the time Peter the Great moved the capital to St. Petersburg in 1712, Moscow had already cemented its chaotic, labyrinthine soul. It remained the spiritual heart. Even stripped of its official status, the old capital continued to hoard wealth and secrets, waiting for the pendulum of history to swing back. That swing returned with violent force in the 20th century, bringing with it the most radical urban engineering project in human history. The Bolsheviks returned the capital to Moscow in 1918, but the medieval street plan was ill-suited for a modern industrial superpower. Joseph Stalin viewed the twisting alleyways and merchant churches not as heritage, but as impediments to efficiency that needed to be surgically removed. The 1935 General Plan for the Reconstruction of Moscow was a blueprint for total domination over the landscape. Old landmarks vanished. The Cathedral of Christ the Savior, a marble titan that had taken 40 years to build, was rigged with dynamite and reduced to rubble in a single morning to make way for a palace of the Soviets that was never built. In its place, engineers conceived a transportation network that would double as a nuclear shelter and an ideological showcase. The Moscow Metro was not merely a subway. It was a subterranean propaganda machine designed to awe the proletariat with the power of the state. 75,000 workers, young Komsomol volunteers and forced laborers alike, descended into the clay soil to dig the first lines by hand and with primitive shields. They utilized marble stripped from Tsarist palaces and granite from the Ukraine to clad the stations in Baroque splendor. Mayakovskaya Station, with its stainless steel arches and mosaics hidden in ceiling cupolas, became an air raid shelter where Stalin gave speeches during the darkest nights of the war. Deep underground, ventilation shafts hummed. While the surface was bombed, the trains kept running, a testament to an infrastructure designed with redundancy as its core philosophy. But the most audacious engineering feats occurred above ground on the widening of Gorky Street, now Tverskaya. The planners demanded a grand boulevard, but massive stone buildings stood in the way of progress. Instead of demolishing them, Soviet engineers lifted them off their foundations. In one of the most surreal construction operations ever documented, the Savinskoy Podvorai, a 23,000-ton apartment complex, was severed from its basement and placed on steel rollers. Hydraulic jacks pushed the behemoth 50 meters back to a new property line. They did this while the tenants were still inside, boiling tea and sleeping in their beds. The gas and water lines connected via flexible hoses to ensure no interruption of life. It was a demonstration of raw industrial might. Following the victory in World War II, the skyline was pierced by the Seven Sisters, a ring of Gothic Stalinist skyscrapers that were intended to rival the vertical dominance of Manhattan. Lev Rudnev led the design of the main building of Moscow State University, a structure that consumed 40,000 tons of steel and required a foundation so deep they had to freeze the swampy soil with liquid nitrogen pipelines just to pour the concrete. Standing at 240 meters, the university building remained the tallest in Europe for decades, a stone spire commanding the Sparrow Hills. These ziggurats anchored the city's silhouette, proving that the Soviet Union could build higher and heavier than the capitalists they opposed. Yet beneath the pomp of the skyscrapers, a shadow city was expanding in the dark. Moscow is rumored to possess the most complex underground network on Earth, far exceeding the public subway maps. The Neglinaya River, once a flowing surface waterway that flooded the city annually, was imprisoned in brick tunnels in the early 19th century and buried beneath the streets. Today, diggers, urban explorers risking arrest crawl through these ancient slime-slicked arteries, their flashlights cutting through steam and darkness. The river roars beneath the luxury boutiques, but deeper still lie the secrets of the Cold War. Historical documents and defectors have long described Metro 2, a parallel classified subway system codenamed D6, built to evacuate the Kremlin leadership to bunkers on the outskirts of the city. While officially unconfirmed, ventilation shafts disguised as nondescript sheds in residential courtyards hint at the existence of tunnels maintained in perpetual readiness. Bunker 42, a command post buried 65 meters beneath Taganka, is now a museum, but it was once a nerve center capable of sustaining life for months after a nuclear strike. Steel blast doors, half a meter thick, guard these silent corridors. This architectural paranoia defines the city's unseen layers, a physical manifestation of a government that always expected the worst. The collapse of the Soviet Union brought a chaotic influx of capital that transformed the gray administrative blocks into a neon-lit playground for the new oligarchy. The skyline erupted again. In the 1990s and 2000s, the Moscow International Business Center, or Moscow City, rose from a former industrial quarry on the Pristinskaya embankment. This cluster of super-tall skyscrapers represents the new Russia, ambitious, glossy, and aggressively modern. The Federation Tower, standing 374 meters tall, pierces the cloud layer with a shard of reflective glass, dominating the horizon like a futuristic watchtower. Concrete mixers work 24/7. To build these glass needles, engineers had to contend with the same soft soil that plagued the Seven Sisters, utilizing massive concrete rafts and deep piles to keep the towers from sinking into the riverbank. The Evolution Tower twists in a DNA-like spiral, a complex geometric feat that changes shape on every floor, reflecting the city's constant state of flux. But the transformation is not just vertical, it is digital. Moscow has morphed into one of the world's most surveilled and automated smart cities. A web of over 200,000 facial recognition cameras now tracks the movement of millions of commuters daily, turning the urban environment into a singular data stream. Traffic flows are managed by algorithms. The Zaryadye Park, built on the expensive ruins of the demolished Rossiya Hotel next to the Kremlin, showcases this blend of nature and technology. Here, a floating bridge cantilevers 70 meters out over the Moskva River without a single support column, holding the weight of thousands of tourists taking selfies against the backdrop of the ancient fortress. It is an engineering marvel that defies gravity, much like the city itself defies its history. Yet for all the glass and fiber optics, the old bones of the city remain visible for those who know where to look. In the courtyards behind Tverskaya, crumbling 19th-century mansions rot quietly behind steel security fences. The tram lines still rattle over the same routes laid out before the revolution. The infrastructure struggles against the sheer density of 12 million registered inhabitants, and likely millions more undocumented. District heating system, a leviathan of pipes that keeps the city alive during the 6-month winter, pumps boiling water through thousands of kilometers of rusting veins. When a pipe bursts, steam erupts from the asphalt like a geyser, a reminder of the fragile truce between the city and the elements. Snowplows clearing Red Square are as much a part of the city's rhythm as the ticking of the clock on the Spasskaya Tower. It is a place of extremes, extreme wealth, extreme cold, and extreme engineering. The transformation of industrial zones into creative clusters, like the Red October chocolate factory turned art district, signals a shift from production to consumption. The distinct smell of chocolate that once wafted over the river has been replaced by the aroma of espresso and expensive cologne. But the industrial legacy is heavy. The soil in some districts is still laden with the heavy metals of Soviet manufacturing, requiring massive remediation projects before luxury housing can rise. In the south, the ZIL automotive plant, a city within a city that once employed 60,000 workers, has been leveled to create a new urban district, a tabula rasa for the 21st century. Architects point at models. This relentless cycle of demolition and construction is the heartbeat of Moscow. It does not renovate, it overwrites. The distinct architectural eras, the Tsarist brick, the Stalinist granite, the Khrushchev panels, and the Putin-era glass stand shoulder to shoulder, an uneasy family portrait of a superpower's evolution. Each layer was built to last 1,000 years, and each was eventually overshadowed by the next ambition. the city is a palimpsest. As the climate warms, bringing freak rainstorms that overwhelm the ancient storm drains, the city faces new engineering challenges. The permafrost is far away, but the freeze-thaw cycles that crack concrete are becoming more unpredictable. The future of Moscow lies in its ability to adapt its colossal, rigid infrastructure to a fluid, uncertain world. It is expanding outwards again, annexing massive territories to the southwest in New Moscow, doubling its official size and promising a greener, more decentralized future. But the center of gravity remains the red-walled fortress. Moscow is a testament to the stubbornness of human settlement. It sits on a plain with no natural defenses other than distance and cold, yet it has become the largest city in Europe. It is a machine for living, built on the bones of its predecessors, constantly consuming its own history to fuel its future. Walking through its streets is not just a commute, it is a traversal of empire, tragedy, and triumph frozen in stone and steel. The wind still bites in December, and in that biting wind, the city stands immovable, a monument to the sheer audacity of building a metropolis where the ground freezes solid half the year. It remains, as it always has been, a fortress that commands the horizon.